the Overman Warrior Podcast.
All right, Rich Hoffman here. So it's Disclosure Day. Trump has done the first part of it. Released some of the UFO files, the UAP files, stuff that Anna Paulina Luna has been talking about, and others. Some of the more open discussions about UFO interactions, aliens, life forms that are out there, and I've talked extensively over the years about my thoughts on aliens, extraterrestrials, what they mean, crop circles, and we're getting ready to have the Spielberg movie, and as I said, Trump needs to release all he can to take the heat off. I mean, even a lot of Democrats are very happy. I saw Jon Stewart even crediting President Trump for releasing the files, because this has been a leftist thing. Everybody cares about it, but this has been primarily a left-leaning curiosity is alien life and UFOs. And full disclosure, John Podesta has been all about it. Hillary Clinton's been all about it. It's been out there. Barack Obama has been trying to get his hands around it. His stake in Netflix, they do all kinds of UFO shows. And I've always kind of generally looked at UFO talk as a distraction, an attempt by big government to say, you need big government to protect yourself from the aliens. My impression of alien life that's out there is I believe very much that there's a vast amount of alien life interacting with Earth. Has been for years. I will go as far to say that I think Earth was settled by aliens. I think they came from places like Mars. I think Mars was settled at one point in time, and I think other planets in the solar system are going to prove over time to have been colonized by human beings. I think we're also going to uncover that the big asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was once host to a planet of people similar to us that was annihilated, and that bits of that costly impact destroyed the planet and proved catastrophic to Mars, its next door neighbor, and that even Earth has seen remnants of that catastrophe in large meteorites, which you can go to the Smithsonian and see, that have entered and caused a lot of devastation on planet Earth. I would go as far to say that the trauma hidden behind human culture is the knowledge of these events and kind of a biological understanding of this seeding method. I go to say that even the building of Serpent Mound on the edge of a crater, an impact crater that's over 300 million years old, had to have come from some knowledge floating around out there, passed down through the generations by some method, whether it was life coming and going, but the record said that there was something that hit there, and they built the Serpent Mound on the edge of that crater. They had to have known. It wasn't just a bunch of Indians lining up the stars for some random reason. They had a deep psychological understanding that there was a need to build a unique earth mound effigy on the edge of a crater that they couldn't have known was a crater until very recent times. Certainly not during their period. When you're talking building something like that at 100 BC or 100 AD or any of that period, there's just no way they could have known that that was an impact crater from a meteorite, some sort of crypto explosion. So with all that said, and hearing all this talk, I would say the most dangerous elements of the UFO releases have been the government themselves. It's not the photos of obviously, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of interactions. I view UFOs coming and going, the discussions, the talk about bodies recovered at Roswell and kept at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I look at those kinds of life forms as like if you were photographing a nice flower and a mosquito flew through your lens across your picture. It's another life form that is interacting with our life form. And for the power of governments and political needs, they have demonized these characters and tried to make them out to be something much bigger than they really are, much more intelligent than they really are, and that gave them power. They could justify black budgets as long as you thought that the aliens were smarter than you were, and they were going to come like War of the Worlds and destroy the planet and everybody on it. And that because they had flying ships that could defy gravity and go excessively fast, and technology that seemed to baffle us, or that we interacted with them, made deals with them, traded some secrets. Maybe we traded them some toothpicks, and they gave us some technology for stealth technology and ways to fly at supersonic speeds that we wouldn't have figured out on our own, or that we developed rocketry along the lines of reverse engineering. I don't think it's coincidence that we went from little prop planes to high propulsion systems that could completely defy radar in a few short years, as soon as the Roswell crashes supposedly occurred. So I do think that there's lots of interactions, have been for years. I've talked about my own interaction with flying saucers, and I don't look at them as superior to us at all. Just life forms that are competing for space. And they may have different technology to get around faster, differently, dimensionally, however you want to talk about it. But I think that even the Bible chronicles a lot of paranormal UFO interactions. And it doesn't undermine God in any way. It just says that there's a lot of paranormal occurrences that took place in the Bible. And this has been going on for a very long time, and even longer. If you study the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a lot of paranormal activity that goes on. And I think it's always been going on, and that the earth was actually seeded. And the ancient alien speculations that go on are fun and fictional and contemplative, but the asking of the questions is important, because the answers are more important and likely head down that path as opposed to what we've kind of lazily came up with in modern science, because it was convenient to a Charles Darwin narrative that suited institutionalized science. So I think it's great that Trump released all these documents. The there is there's not a lot of commentary involved saying, yes, we have talked to this species of alien, and yeah, we're swapping DVD movies together. And we traded them. The latest movie we traded them was Harry Met Sally, and they gave us some information about tinfoil or some new plastic, or some new element that nobody knows about yet, and we're using it to gain leverage over our enemies in the political sphere. Everybody's looking for a smoking gun. I think Trump's message to say, hey, here's some bunch of information, have fun talking about it, just like with the Kennedy assassination. There's always more to it. I think the power of government, you're talking about a government that doesn't know how to even run a budget. You expect the government to really be competent in handling negotiations with other species of aliens, especially when you have a deep state that has used them to acquire funds, used them to use fear to control populations by saying, look at the boogeyman. I will always say that the most terrifying element of the UFO sightings has been a government that operated in secrecy and used aliens and alien conspiracies as a reason to secure infinite amounts of money and pay themselves to basically do nothing and control a narrative and rule with fear over the people of populations. Was always my determination in Roswell. There was a lot of constitutional violations that occurred. Military pretty much took over the story. And it was really a way to protect nuclear secrets. Yes, was there a UFO crash? I think so. Probably had something to do with some of the occult rituals that were going on with Jack Parsons, and called something up, and it probably crashed as a result of interfering with us as people on Earth. And, so it's hard to get a straight story. But the worst part of the story has been the tyranny that the story caused over people who should have had constitutional limits on the power of government. So UFO stories are really government overreach and not so much about the aliens themselves, which I think is the moral of the story to Trump releasing these things, because it takes away the power of the deep state that's been really undermining forever. It lets people know, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff out there. What we know is what you're seeing. Here it is. And I think people want a more sophisticated answer, but I knew it wasn't coming based on my own research into these things. And I think I'm not surprised at all in the government position on this. The government just released what it knows. And people were disappointed that the government isn't all powerful and doesn't know much. And I think they're also disappointed that the aliens don't seem to know much either. The aliens, you want to think that they're smart, that they're godlike, that they have some great interaction that can bring boons to society and teach us to live in peace, and all those great communist diatribes, which is what the fantasy of Democrats liking these UFO disclosures are all about. They're going to come and teach us to live in harmony. Or then there's the other side that wants to think it's Mars attacks where the aliens came and just indiscreetly destroyed everybody. Or that every alien that you see is like Predator, or they've moved the xenomorph from the Alien movies. They're just going to hunt us all and kill us. It makes good theater to talk about that in these movies, and that there should be fear that these things are out there controlling our lives in some spectral way, but it's really the government that has been using essentially competing life forms, or life forms living in conjunction with us that have their own interest in mind, what they do, and that you have a government that has used that interaction to gain power for themselves. And by Trump releasing these things, he's really saying, government, here's what we know. Now you can have fun digesting all this information. There's obviously something more to it, and we have a lot more to learn on the topic, which is why I sat down and wrote The Politics of Heaven. That's why I'm talking about it more often. I knew, especially after I had a UFO encounter in Monroe, that was less than coincidence. I felt that, okay, there's something I could contribute to this whole story. So I wrote The Politics of Heaven to explain what I think is there on all these disclosure reports. And as we get more into it, and people were out there talking about spirits and demons and the Nephilim and the fallen angels, and spirits roaming the earth, and then interdimensional beings flying around UFOs. There's a lot going on, and that means that people need a proper context of history. So I sat down and wrote it in The Politics of Heaven. And it's obviously more complex than what we've seen in the disclosure reports, but I think it's a first step that we all have to get to getting to the truth of these things. And the first thing to do is remove the fear, so that you can have adequate study and take away the government's ability to hide these things, so you can have a proper way to learn what you need to learn. But to accelerate that process, I did write The Politics of Heaven. It's in the process of going through the back end of a first draft, which can take a while. I accelerated the writing cycle because I knew this was all coming to a head, and not to capitalize on it so much, but good business ventures, you do find the tide and you write them. I knew that the reason I sat down and wrote the book is because people are curious about these things, and they want answers. They want explanations, and I have a viewpoint based on experience that I can offer. So I put it down, and I'm putting it out there for people to drive the narrative and get to the next layer of questions now that we're starting to see all this voluminous amounts of information that's coming out that people are just now starting to get their minds wrapped around. There'll be more information that will come out. But the moral of the story is government was never to be worshipped as a god, and it was never to use the fear of those things out there that could hurt you. You've got to pay us and give us power so we can protect you. It was always unconstitutional and always bad, and always the most scary part of the story. Wasn't the aliens, wasn't the cattle mutilations, wasn't the abductions, wasn't the crop circles. It was the government that used them to drive fear to control populations en masse. And that's really what you need to know about it, and we'll get into it far more in the months and years to come. But it is why I wrote The Politics of Heaven, and because the disclosure movement was coming to a point, and we're getting to the point where it's going from tin-hatted conspiracy to mainstream discussion. And it's soon now, because of these releases, going to be the topic of every conversation, and it will change a lot of the speculation that has gone to the ancient aliens type of broadcasts into something I think much more scientific. But first you have to shatter the previous assumptions, and that's the process the human race is going through right now. And the Trump administration released some files. It's going to be a slow drip. That's going to be years of looking at it and thinking about what it means. But the main thing that it means coming out of the gate is the government was never all that competent. They certainly weren't good enough to really handle the information they had and to keep it from the public in order to gain power over the election process of a free republic. Instead, there's always a looming threat in the background, that, just like they try to spread communism around the world in order to give the core authority figures centralized power. It's the same thing they've been doing with the whole alien bit. So is there something to be worried about with the aliens? They've always been around. They've always been interacting. I look at them as a species. Like I pay them about as much attention as I would a bird flying across the sky. And I don't worry about them taking over our planet or overruling us from some extraterrestrial reference point. I think we're going to be very disappointed when we find out just how dumb a lot of life forms are out there and how unique humans are. And when you go back to Genesis and think about God created us in his image, I think you're going to start to see how special and relevant that is in the context of alien life forms from all over the universe, not just this galaxy. But our life and our thoughts and our imaginations and what we do is actually quite unique. And that's probably the biggest secret that those who want to have power over us have been trying to conceal. And I think that's the ultimate revelation. It comes out of the declassification of these UFO reports and the fears we had about an alien menace that never quite materialized because they were never quite there to provide that menace, but governments want us to believe so that they could have infinite growth in government and enrich themselves in the process by gaining power they never deserved. And that's one of the reasons I wrote The Politics of Heaven, to explain all that to people who are scratching their heads and wondering what's going on. What age do we live in, and why is it so crazy? And I like to explain it to people so they can have a point of reference to grab onto and understand how unique we are, not just on this planet or this solar system or this galaxy, but in the universe, as we were created by God to do God's work on earth as it is in heaven and everywhere else. Anyway, Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you will love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.
Thank you for listening. Coming soon, The Politics of Heaven in 2027. A treasure hunt through heaven and all human history.